this off, we're going to show a really quick kind of welcome video for those of you who have been at the conference. It's 30 seconds. Hopefully it won't be too painful to watch again. And for those of you who haven't, this is your first session, welcome, and take this in. So yeah, once again, NOFA's mission is nourishing people, land, and justice through organic agriculture. And I just encourage you to check out our website if you want to learn more about our programs. We're working both on the supply and the demand side of the food system, and really emphasizing policy work as well. And that is a nice way that we integrate across programs. I'd be remiss if we didn't say thank you to our sponsors. All of these businesses followed us in our pivot to this online format and gracefully gave us the support that we need to make this happen. We have to also do this little membership pitch, but we are a membership organization, and we do hope that we transfer a lot of benefits to becoming a member to folks that join us. So, consider it. There's a sliding scale, and there's ways to access it, hopefully within your means. And then lastly, a few different workshop guidelines. So we're going to switch gears to hearing from the folks at Migrant Justice, which is why you all showed up. So welcome everybody, and take it away.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I'm just gonna put on our presentation and start sharing my screen, and let Abel take it.
Thank you, Madeline. Can you guys hear me well? Awesome, perfect. Yeah, so thank you so much for everything and for being here with us today. My name is Abel Luna. An organizer with Migrant Justice. I've been with the organization for it's gonna be going on to 8 years now. Yeah, today I'm here with Madeline and Jadida. You want to introduce yourself, Madeline?
Yeah, thanks so much for having us. My name is Madeline, also part of the Migrant Justice team. My role is working with allies, so really pleased to be here.
¿Quieres introducirte, Jadi?
Hola, mi nombre es Comité de Coordinación de Justicia Migrante. Y discúlpenme, pero estoy preparando comida y al mismo tiempo atendiendo la llamada.
Hi, this is Jadira, Jadi from the Coordinating Committee of Migrant Justice, and she's prepping food at the same time that she's on the call. So you'll see a lot of food going on. Perfect. Yeah, thank you so much. So we want to thank our host, NOFA Vermont, for hosting us today, and allowing us to be in the space, in your space, to talk a little bit about the work that we do and how we do it, why do we do the work the way that we do it. Yeah, before getting started, I wanted to ask if any of you has been involved with Migrant Justice in one way or another, and just very briefly mention or share what has been your experience. And anyone, really, feel free.
I guess I'll just talk. Hi, my name is Kate. I use she, her pronouns. My partner and I got involved with Migrant Justice when we were marching on the ICE facilities in Williston. My partner was really active in making a lot of banners we worked with community voices for I think it was Migrant, right? It was a long name, but we worked with them, and through that organization worked with Migrant Justice. So that was my experience. Thank you guys for being here.
Thank you. Someone else?
Hi, my name's Rayvon Kenyon. I go by they, them pronouns. And it's actually hand in hand with something that we're working on in Ithaca, New York. We actually are trying to do cop watching as like a form of community action and towards, justice. And part of that is we're actually taking rapid response trainings for ICE. So this is very much up the alley of what we're trying to spread out and help with, because it is a pretty prevalent problem in New York State.
Yep. All right. Yeah, well, and I'm sure a lot of you have heard or been part of Migrant Justice in one way or another. So thank you for your support. Yeah, so moving on, I think just very briefly wanted to share. We talk a lot about migrant justice and the organization and our work. But what is migrant justice really? And so basically, migrant justice it's a human rights, a grassroots human rights organization that was built by farm workers, and to this day continues to be led by migrant farm workers, milking cows in farms in Vermont. And the purpose of the organization, the mission of the organization is to build the voice, the capacity and the power of migrant farm workers to change their reality and conditions that people are facing. And we do that also by engaging allies and to help us advance human rights and economic justice. So that's a little bit of the work that we do. So Migrant Justice really it got started in 2009, end of 2009 on December, after the death of a young farm worker named Jose Obed Santos Cruz. Jose Obed was only 19 years old. He was 19 years old, and he was killed in a workplace accident. On a day that could have been prevented on the dairy farms. He was wearing winter clothing, and his clothing got wrapped or tangled around the gutter scraper, and basically strangled him to death. But that was the spark to the conversation amongst the community, migrant farm workers. What are we going to do? To stop this from happening again, so it doesn't happen to any one of us. So at first it was very like small meetings in farm worker housing, in farm worker trailers, just conversations about so what are people facing on their farms, and what are some ways that we can things that we can do to prevent this. And then eventually it became what we now call our community asambleas or community assemblies, where we come together, we share a meal, we talk. We talk about the different problems that people are facing, and also talk about solutions, right? So it's a space where we come together and we dream about, these are the things that we're facing, but also, together we brainstorm about, okay, this is, what it can look like, in a different way, and the way that we want it to look. And so we do that. And through that process, we have developed our human rights map or human rights agenda that includes 4 main pillars. One is freedom from discrimination, the access to freedom from discrimination, access to healthcare, also access to work and live with dignity, basically, on the dairy farms, and the other one is access to transportation. And through sort of through those 4 main pillars, we guide our work. And we have had a lot of achievements and success with the driver license campaign, with the fair and impartial policing policy, one of the best policies across the country, to stop the collaboration between local police and border patrol, immigration, ICE, law enforcement. So we are a border state, and that's something that is very sort of present in the day-to-day of the migrant community. So that's a huge one. Those are some of the work that we have done and the work that we continue to do. Yes, you wanna switch it over, Madeline? Although we, like I mentioned, we have had success with driver license campaign, with fair and impartial policing policy, and we also, had a huge victory with Meal with Dignity campaign, with Ben and Jerry signing on. But that only covers a little, some of the farms, not every farm in the state of Vermont. There are many more farms, and there are other issues that are happening in those farms outside of the program. And to understand that sort of a little bit better, throughout the years, we have done, some surveys with the community, surveying over 300 workers. And what we have learned is that 80 to 90% of the dairy farms in the state of Vermont hire some sort of, outside help. And usually migrant farm workers are the ones, working on, very tiny farms, 70, 100 cows, to farms where there are 1,500 plus cows. And so, it's in between all of that. And, some farms are small, farms can be very isolated and also invisible. And workers have to live where they work, and work where you live. So you're there 24 hours a day, every day. You don't leave the place. So you're always there, and that's something also that can sort of weigh in after some time. And some of the issues with housing, that we have learned, there is a lot of shared, rooms. For example, sometimes there's 2 to 3 people per room. There is sometimes housing with there's no water, running water or drinking water. A lot of issues with heating, and being in out like rural Vermont, and in the winter, it can be very tough and dangerous. Some of the other conditions that we've learned, is that there's high percentages of accidents and injuries on farms with chemicals, which are used a lot, very often on farms. Also, injuries with heavy machinery, for example, working with big tractors and hundreds of pounds animals. There's a lot of lack of protection, lack of access to healthcare, and one of the things that also happens in the dairy industry, is because there is a lot of labor protections. People are exposed to sexual harassment, gender discrimination, unjust firings, and human trafficking. Those are some of the things that we have learned throughout, the surveys and connecting with the community. And that help us to get a better understanding of what is it that we need to focus on, and what is it that we need to be doing to better work with the community and change those conditions that are happening. And we don't want to say that everything is bad, that every single farm in Vermont, they're treating workers, they're in a bad way. There are a lot of farms that are doing the right thing, that are paying workers right, that are giving good housing, and the rights are being respected, but there are farms that where that is not happening, and we can sort of turn the blind eye and pretend, that is not happening. And that's when we have to organize, and we have to to change those conditions. I think we have to ask ourselves, why are things like this, right? Why is it that there are these conditions on dairy farms in Vermont? Why are these conditions happening in not just in Vermont, and not just in dairy farms, but across the board, right? In tomato fields in Florida, in factories in Bangladesh, but we have to ask ourselves this question, why is it that conditions are like this? And even when farmers want to do the right thing, when they know that they're not paying that much, that the higher wages, and they don't have like the best housing conditions, and they want to do the right thing, sometimes they face a lot of economic challenges in doing so, increasing the wages or providing a better housing. And so to understand the solution, we really have to look at the root, and we have to look at the industry structure, to really see what is happening and sort of what's going on. And sort of when we look at the the industry, when for example the picture that we're looking at is it's a triangle, and it basically shows the path of where the money is, right? And basically, if you start looking at the bottom, there it says trabajadores, which means farm workers. That the majority of people that are working on the farms, milking the cows. Then on the middle, you have farms, co-ops, and other sort of like the middle company, and then at the very end, you have the big corporations that are taking home all of the money at the end of the day. So at the very bottom, you have the majority, the biggest part, is workers, and at the very top, you have very few people, very few buyers, where their power is more concentrated. They have more power to lower the prices of milk because they're buying that much more. They're that much more bigger, that more powerful, and that creates a downward pressure, on labor conditions because they're lowering the price of milk. And when workers want to ask for a wage raise, the farmer will always say, the prices of milk are low, and that is the reality, right? Majority of the time. But that's sort of the when we want to look at a solution, we have to look at the whole industry, and that's a little bit of the picture there. And so it's important to understand that the price of milk today are the same prices that it was like in the 1970s. Which is to think about that, it's crazy, but and also important to understand that the workers and farmers have a lot more in common, a lot more of the same interest in transforming this industry, and so more in common than we have differences. And it's important to understand that, that the companies that are taking home all of the money at the end of the day are responsible for the problem, and that they should be held responsible at the same time for being responsible and being part of the solution. Cool. So, once we sort of did a lot of the surveys and we, had a lot of the results, we were faced with this huge question of, what do we do? What is it that we're going to do to transform the conditions that are happening on dairy farms, and to make sure that we're thinking about supply chain as part of the solution. So basically. We created the Milk with Dignity program, which we call a new day in the dairy industry. And basically what it means is that, this solves the problem at its roots because it includes the entire corporations. So Migrant Justice signs legally binding agreements with the corporations, and the corporations take responsibility for the conditions that are happening in their supply chain, all of the human rights abuses that are happening. And so the corporations commit to buy from those farms that participate in the program and pay them a premium, for complying with code of conduct. So the farms receive the premium and they commit to using it, right, to comply with a code that has been developed and written by workers themselves on those farms. And so that code of conduct creates the standards for wages, hours, rest, housing, health, and safety, and protections against harassment, discrimination, and retaliations for farm workers. And it represents the definition of dignified work for the migrant community that all workers put together. And through this process, our workers are empowered to become frontline workers and defenders of their rights, and also to ensure that the program is being complied with and is being respected. It's not just a code of conduct and it lives there on a shelf. Migrant Justice, we come into the farms, we do education with the workers on your rights and how to access your rights, and how to implement those rights. And there's also an independent organization called the Milk with Dignity Standards Council that monitors the conditions of the farms and talks to workers regularly, if their rights are being met or not, in response to complaints, and audits farms in the programs as well. And the farms that don't comply with the code, the Milk with Dignity Standards Council can suspend them, and they can lose their premium and their ability to sell to the Ben and Jerry's in this case. But that's a little bit about the Meal with Dignity program and how it works. And it's a program that is not just being used here in the U.S. We're part of what we call the Worker-Driven Social Responsibility Network, Worker Responsibility Model. Yeah, sorry. And it's a model that is being used not just in the U.S., but it's also being used across the globe. In many countries, in many sectors. For example, in Florida, tomato fields, in Bangladesh, in factories where they make clothing for like Nike and Adidas and other huge companies that sell clothes. In Minnesota, with construction workers, yeah, so we are learning the same lessons and implementing the same model. We learn about the worker-driven social responsibility model through the CIW, the Coalition of Monthly Workers, and the Fair Food Programming down in Florida, since they have already 14 agreements with different corporations, which is it's awesome. Yeah, and so we sort of tried to adapt this model into the dairy industry, and one of the things that we do is a lot of worker-to-worker exchanges and learning, between organizations, between organizations in Florida, in Vermont, organizations in Bangladesh. We continue to connect with each other and learn about the things that are happening as we implement these models to continue to improve it. Yeah, and so that's a little bit about sort of the WSR model and how the Meal with Dignity program works. And again, sort of our first, the first company that we decided to invite was Ben & Jerry's. And Ben & Jerry's was, it's a local Vermont, company, and we think about it as a small shop here in Vermont, but they're global, they're huge, they're all over the place. And when we first invited Ben & Jerry's to join the program, they said no from the beginning. They didn't want to accept joining the program, and some of you might know, but there was a 3-year campaign to push them to actually sign on to the Meal with Dignity program. It took a lot of work, a lot of protests in front of the stores. We did a lot of street theater, a lot of picketing in their board meetings, including a 13-mile march from Montpelier State House to their Waterbury plant, and speaking tour, and a bunch of different things that we actions to get Ben & Jerry's to sign. Yeah, so they finally they signed the agreement in October 3rd, 2017. That's when they first signed the agreement, and that was a huge accomplishment for migrant community here in Vermont, and other workers organizations across the country were really inspired as well. And yeah, so the program right now is being implemented. It covers 100% of the Ben & Jerry's supply chain in the Northeast. Over 250 workers, and it covers now 20% of the dairy industry in Vermont, and some farms in New York State as well. And yeah, we continue. We do the education sessions, and these are like really important. The education sessions, like I mentioned it earlier, but they're really important because in the dairy farm, sort of never before you have workers, farmers, managers, learning and about their rights and also about their responsibilities. What happens if if you treat a worker this way, the way that you're not supposed to, what are the consequences under the program, and that is really powerful. It sort of changes the way as a worker, the way you see your power on the farm, and so that's it has a huge impact there. So education it's key, and the within the Standards Council continues to monitor farms for compliance. So far, there's hundreds of thousands of dollars that have moved directly from Ben & Jerry's into workers' pockets in the form of raises, bonuses, vacations, and many things that workers have never seen before. And also a lot of that is going to farms in terms of as economic relief for farmers, for the low prices of milk that people are facing right now. And so, with all of this, that's when we say, the new day has arrived. And and it's important that we continue to do this work, to continue to engage other companies to join the program. And I think
So we're going to show a brief video here of testimonies as Abel was talking about the new day of Milk with Dignity having arrived. So this is just a brief video that we wanted to share. I'm not going to do that.
Mi trabajo empezando, pues nos levantamos a la mañana, llegamos, prendemos las máquinas, arreglamos todo, sacamos las vacas del corral, las metemos para ordeñar. O sea, es todo lo que se hace en un día normal, pero que hay ranchos que trabajan de 12 horas corridas, le dan media hora de comida de las 12 horas, eso está más pesado.
¿Por qué es necesario? Porque es importante para nosotros como trabajadores que salimos de nuestra casa para mejorar nuestras vidas, no para estar viviendo como te dijera, en condiciones que meramente ya no son humanas.
Pero sin el programa nosotros pues no nos aumentaban el sueldo y pues del día de descanso ni se hablara. No sabíamos qué derechos o qué podemos exigir nosotros como trabajadores.
Pues antes aquí no nos tomaban en cuenta como cuando nos enfermábamos. Ni nos llevaban al doctor y pues ese día lo teníamos que trabajar. Y si no lo trabajábamos, pues ese día pues era descontado prácticamente. Y pues ahora bajo el programa de Leche con Dignidad, no lo trabajamos y pues aparte no nos pagan y pues ya los patrones nos llevan al doctor y pues eso es muy importante para mí, para nosotros.
Bueno, se siente uno más protegido porque ya sabe uno puede, o sea, ellos te orientan a lo que puede pasar, a lo que tus derechos que tú tienes como trabajador. El derecho que tienes, el respeto tanto de tu patrón, se siente uno más belicosa, más protegido.
Si un día yo, por ejemplo, cuando voy a tirar cal en los grupos o hacer el agua de las patas, no tengo las mascarillas, los guantes, todo lo que necesito para que no me dañe mi salud, entonces ya el patrón tiene que acceder a comprar las cosas.
Ahora ya tenemos un día completo, que antes no se tenía. Bueno, ahora que tengo mi bebé, pues ya pasamos más tiempo con ella. Ya tenemos por lo menos un día para estar con ella todo el día. Se siente uno más seguro por todos los beneficios, pues, y saber todos nuestros derechos.
Mediante el programa se ha hecho posible tener una casa nueva, porque antes estábamos en una traila que estábamos más amontonados, 2 personas en un cuarto, poco espacio. Entonces aquí la nueva vivienda pues ha cambiado demasiado porque todo es nuevo.
Hay algunas personas que le dan miedo para hablar con los dueños o exigirle algo que ocupan o cualquier cosa, ya sea porque pues tienen miedo porque los corran o algo así, los despidan del trabajo. Con el programa nos hace trabajar mejor, más a gusto, más más en confianza con los dueños, sabiendo cuáles son nuestros derechos, o sea, de no ser o sea, humillado o decir o que te digan cosas que te ofendan. O sea, hay muchos ranchos que pasa eso y por el programa ya no puede pasar eso. Como los rancheros también se benefician mucho por el programa. Así, yo creo que ambos tienen un gran beneficio, como nosotros, un gran beneficio entre ambos.
Y para mí es muy importante que expanda el programa porque por eso el patrón le apoyan a él, pero tampoco también como nosotros como trabajadores tenemos esa voz de ya decir, sabes, quiero un día de descanso, quiero que hagas esto, y eso es algo necesario para cada trabajador, para que nosotros nos sintamos seguros en decir algo, no nos sintamos con miedo, sintamos la seguridad de decirle al patrón, sabes qué, quiero esto, y ya no tengamos tanto miedo a ellos.
I'm just going to take us off screen share for a moment while I get us back to the presentation. And while I do that, I think the coordinating committee leader, Yadira, is going to share.
Hola, Yadi. Creo que sí, si puedes compartir, Yadi, ahora un poco. Sería chido.
Hola, pues yo por parte de Justicia Migrante he conocido ya ahora y he abierto como que mis ojos. Antes yo pienso que vivía en un mundo en obscuras porque yo desde que llegué lo único que conocía era este rancho. Entonces yo no sabía, pero no conocía la manera en que vivían los demás trabajadores alrededor en los ranchos. Verdaderamente son en condiciones inhumanas, en condiciones inhumanas, las casas en las que viven, trabajan 12 horas, 13 horas sin un tiempo de lunch. O sea, y a mí eso es lo que me indigna porque yo pienso, si los animalitos que son animalitos tienen su tiempo de comer, entonces, ¿por qué los trabajadores inmigrantes no pueden tener también un tiempo, ser tratados dignamente? Yo visité hace unos días.
¿Me das un chance para traducir eso?
Sí.
Ajá, chido. Si no acabo. So I'm going to interpret that. Hi everyone, Jadira, member of the coordinating committee of Migrant Justice. At first, when I got involved with Migrant Justice, but at the beginning I didn't know much about the conditions that my community was living in and the conditions that other farm workers were living in. When I started to get more involved with Migrant Justice, when I started to get to know other farms, other people, I started to realize all the inhumane conditions that the workers are sometimes living and working on 12 to 13 hours a day without a lunch break. And all of that makes me really sad, because even the cows have time to eat, and why can't we migrant farm workers, get a lunch break on some of these farms? Sí, dale.
Sí, y entonces, haciendo el recorrido, visitando los otros ranchos, yo ahí me pongo a pensar entonces algo que en una reunión tuve, una plática, lo de las dos Américas. Entonces yo ya fui a conocer realmente la segunda América, donde los trabajadores trabajan largas horas de trabajo, donde son explotados y te das cuenta que el rico se sigue haciendo rico y el trabajador nada más se sigue acabando en salud, en estrés, porque para él no hay muchos cambios. Aquí el claro ejemplo está, los ranchos el patrón se sigue siendo más rico. Y las tiendas de supermercados, un claro ejemplo es Hannaford. El que cuántas cadenas de abastecimiento tienen. ¿Traduce, Abel?
Sí. So, dame un segundito, ya estoy llegando. Okay. So, I'm now experiencing. So there's this the idea of the two different countries, two Americas, and I live in one in one America. Now I'm living in the second America, where basically there's a lot of exploitation. People working long hours. But there's basically no. Basically no humanity, no dignity. Where the rich, only wants to get richer, and the poor gets more poor than what it is, and nothing changes. None of those conditions changes, and so to give a clear example of that, and what I'm talking about is farms and Hannaford's, is huge. It's a huge corporation, continues to get richer and richer, and for us farm workers, we continue to to live in the same thing and continue to be poor. Sí, dale.
Sí, por eso yo vivo en condiciones buenas, pero yo no peleo por mí, yo no exijo por mí, sino yo quiero que, como yo estoy en condiciones bien, yo quiero que todos los trabajadores así estén. Por eso estamos en la lucha y queremos que organizaciones o más personas, no necesariamente tenemos que ser los que estén en la lucha nada más trabajadores inmigrantes, sino que más personas se nos unan. Entre más personas sabemos que podemos llegar a Hannaford y hacer que se una a nosotros, a leche con dignidad.
Chido. Okay. So yeah, and so this is why I'm fighting. This is why I continue to fight, to, for example, to change those conditions. I'm living in a good farm. My conditions and my living conditions, working conditions are good, and I want other workers to be living in the same conditions as I am, and that's why we all need to continue to push Hannaford's, to join the Mill with Dignity program. And it doesn't just, it has to be farm workers plus consumers, right? Because if they see us alone, but if they see us together, we're going to have more pressure. We're going to be able to push them more to join the program. And so that's what we're trying to do. See, Jadi?
Y pues a mí me gustaría muchísimo que si ustedes nos pudieran ayudar a hacer el cambio, que sea cambiamos de año y que sea un año de buenas experiencias y que tocáramos el corazón de cada persona para que nos pudieran ayudar.
Ajá, sí. ¿Eso o todavía más te falta un poco?
Eso, y ya terminé.
Okay. Yeah, so we're asking for your support. It'll be great if you support us, on the actions, and as we continue to push Hannaford to join, as we continue to reach more people and reach out to others, that will definitely help us to reach our goal, which is get Hannaford to sign the program. And I think that eso es todo. Right?
Sí, eso es todo.
And I think that was it from Yadira.
Gracias. Preguntas, aquí estoy.
And she'll be there for questions if people have any.
So, can I hop in? There's 2 questions in the chat that I want to see if you all can answer before we get too far along. First one, Catherine is wondering about the timing of of Ben & Jerry's signing on, and she was asking, is this before or after Unilever bought Ben & Jerry's? So it was not a decision to resist the Milk with Dignity program by the Vermont company under Ben & Jerry, or was it?
Yeah, they signed on after they were bought by Unilever. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then Rayvon is asking, what are the safety conditions surrounding COVID looking like at these farms?
You wanna go, Mari?
Safety conditions like protections for workers.
Yeah, it's just something that I actually live not far from a couple farms that I actually personally know a lot of migrant workers, and I actually haven't been able to keep in contact with them, but that's something that is pretty prevalent in Ithaca, where safety conditions for just your everyday workers have not been really met. And that was concerning for me. So I was just wondering if that had been a discussion brought up just to ensure that they're also being treated with the same idea that, you know, there's a pandemic ensuing. We need to make sure they're taken care of and have the correct material for that.
Yeah. I think that's actually a great, I'm gonna pose that question to Yadira. Entonces, Yadira, no sé si podrías compartir un poco cómo han sido las condiciones ahora con COVID en los ranchos.
Pues para nosotros fue difícil, más para mí y para los trabajadores aquí que somos padres y y para nosotros no, ¿cómo le explico? Para nosotros continuamos como si no hubiera habido pandemia. Para nosotros no dijeron deben de tomarse las medidas necesarias. Aquí no prohibieron las visitas de los ranchos, gracias a Dios aquí nadie se enfermó, pero fuimos tratados, bueno, y sí, nada más fuimos tratados como trabajadores esenciales, pero que nosotros seguimos impulsando el país a pesar de que había pandemia, pero fue así nada más como de palabra, porque no fuimos reconocidos. Porque claro ejemplo está el cheque de estímulo económico. Ahí ciertamente dijeron, sí, son trabajadores esenciales, pero ahí no fuimos tratados como trabajadores esenciales. Ya hasta ahora fuimos reconocidos, pero no porque ellos dijeron, ok, los vamos a reconocer. No, es porque presionamos. Ya es como fuimos reconocidos, pero no porque ellos decidieron, sino que ya no queremos eso, que nosotros tengamos que presionar, que ellos nos tengan en cuenta siempre, ¿no? Que a la mínima, ahorita es una pandemia, un COVID, después, ¿qué va a ser? Y después nosotros, cosa que venga, nosotros tenemos que seguir presionando. ¿Puedes traducir, a ver?
Sí. ¿Puedo? No sé, madre, ¿estabas tomando nota?
Sí, yo puedo. And so Yadira says, yeah, the pandemic has been incredibly difficult for myself, for other farm workers, especially for those of us who are parents. We've had to continue working, continue our work on the farm as if there isn't a pandemic. We aren't able to quarantine, and luckily, no one on my farm has gotten sick. But we've been called essential in words, essential workers, but at the same time excluded from protections that are being given to other workers, and in particular the federal stimulus that people received in this country. And now we're finally receiving a stimulus from a COVID stimulus from the state, but it's not because the state just like decided to give us the money. It's because we organized. We had to build pressure and really call on the state to take us into account. And we don't know what's going to happen afterwards. We don't know what the future holds, but we know that we're going to have to keep organizing and keep building pressure.
Thank you. Anything that small organizations can do? Is there any way we could get supplies to people? Is that like something that's necessary? Like masks and, you know, basic amenities?
We have a ton of masks right now, actually, that have been donated. And Yadira was talking about the campaign to get the state of Vermont to provide a stimulus for people who were excluded from the federal stimulus because of their immigration status. And that was a whole campaign that the community won. But I think the second half of the presentation that maybe we can move into shortly really focuses on Milk with Dignity and how people can get involved in supporting farm workers in their struggle to just improve conditions across the board in the workplace and in the home. And we can talk more about how that applies to COVID too. So maybe with that, can we move into the second half?
Yeah, there's a couple more questions in the chat, and I think I'll leave it to you guys to think about flow and timing. But there's one question about just how the Hannaford's protesting is going, because so Adrian was saying that there's a march planned for last March before everything shut down. So like, has pressure been able to get kept up, and has there been any progress?
Yeah, that's a great question and a perfect segue. I think let's move into the Hannaford campaign section of the presentation. I'm just going to go back to screen sharing so we can see. Okay, and then we'll do question and answer and discussion at the end as well. But yeah, so Yadira mentioned Hannaford, and Abel was talking about the Milk with Dignity program, and as you saw in the testimonies in the video that we shared, just the incredible power and success of the Milk with Dignity program. And now that it's implemented into Ben & Jerry's supply chain, the big question then is like, where do we go next? How do we expand this really successful program? And so Yadira mentioned Hannaford, and that's because Hannaford is the target of the next Milk with Dignity campaign. And I'm sure that many of you are probably very familiar with Hannaford. It's a local supermarket. There's about 200 stores across the Northeast region. And that means that they're a really important player in the dairy industry here. They're a large buyer of dairy in the region. And then they also sell a lot of that milk under the Hannaford store brands in their supermarkets. And the Hannaford store is owned by a big multinational corporation. It's called Ahold Delhaize, and that company, Ahold Delhaize, has an annual global sales of more than $74 billion. So that's another reason why, after a lot of study and analysis, Farmworkers decided to go with Hannaford as the next company to invite to join the program. Another reason why Hannaford makes sense is that they have what's called a responsible retailing program that says that they're committed to sourcing practices that respect human rights. And so Farmworkers are saying, okay, if these are your values and you're claiming to stand for responsible retailing, then Milk with Dignity should really be something that you would be interested in participating in. And since Hannaford is not just a Vermont company, it's in states all across the Northeast. It's going to have an enormous impact when Hannaford joins the Milk with Dignity program, because it will allow these rights and protections to be implemented not just on farms in Vermont, but across the Northeast region. So it's a really exciting potential. And so a little bit of to answer the question about like where are we at with Hannaford? What's going on with the campaign? In the summer of 2019, that was the first time that Farmworkers actually reached out to Hannaford to get in touch and to try and sit down and talk about this issue, talk about Milk with Dignity. Hannaford didn't respond. And so in 2019, on October 3rd, which is that birthday of Milk with Dignity, the day that Ben & Jerry's signed on to the program, that's when Farmworkers launched a public campaign calling on Hannaford join Milk with Dignity. And this is actually a beautiful photo from that day when farm workers marched to one of the local stores in Burlington. And then 1 month later, we actually coordinated actions at more than 20 stores all across the region, where allies got together and delivered letters to their local store managers calling on Hannaford to join Milk with Dignity. In addition to that, there have been petitions, there's a big petition, there's been national organizations have stepped up to support the campaign. And I know that many of you have been involved who are in this workshop right now. So I just wanted to invite folks, anybody take part in, write a letter to Hannaford or join in one of these marches, or even on social media. Feel free to just like take yourself off mute and shout out if you've been involved in something.
Yeah, I was at the collective action where people marched with the letter giving campaign to the different Hannafords. I was at the one in South Burlington, chanted outside Hannaford for a while, delivered the letter, and the manager was very receptive.
Awesome. Thank you, Caitlin. Was that in 2019 when we were first in November?
Yeah, it was. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Cool. Oh, that's amazing. Thank you. Anybody else take part in some of this stuff?
I delivered a letter to a staffer at the Hannafords in South Burlington, but I haven't. I wanted to get more so that I could keep up the pressure. And the good thing to hear that going to the manager is a worthwhile idea. I would do that the next time.
Fantastic. Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to talk more about actions that can be taken. Thank you, Catherine. Anybody else want to chime in? Well, there'll be lots more opportunities, but yeah, so this is sort of how the Milk with Dignity campaign with Hannaford began at the end of 2019. And then we were getting ready to escalate the campaign. In March of last year, farm workers were out on the road, literally doing a regional speaking tour, going to meet with organizations and community groups all over the Northeast to build awareness and support for this campaign. And we were getting ready for this there was going to be this big march in Maine at the Hannaford headquarters. But that's when COVID hit. And so I'm just gonna switch. And so that's when COVID hit in March of last spring. And we had to really change what we were doing and adapt our plans. And we know that the pandemic has had a really big impact on food systems across the board. And over the last almost year now, we've seen grocery workers be really rightly be celebrated for putting themselves at risk to keep the food shelves stocked. And we're also seeing, as Vidya was talking about, having to continue to work through the pandemic, we also see farm workers being called essential workers and having to continue to go to work, continue producing the milk throughout the pandemic. And this has been a time when we really see the difference between farms and workers that are part of the Milk with Dignity program, those farms that are selling milk to Ben and Jerry's. We've seen in this time how things like paid sick days, having access to personal protective equipment, the ability to speak up without fear of retaliation, those things have been even more important during the pandemic. And then on the flip side, for farm workers who are not part of the Milk with Dignity program, we're seeing the pandemic and the economic crisis creating even more vulnerable situations for workers. And at the same time, grocery stores like Hannaford have really seen a soar in their profits during the pandemic, with sales going up. and at the same time really not doing anything to step up and protect the rights of the farm workers who are creating the products that are on Hannaford's store brand shelves. So despite the pandemic, COVID has obviously really changed and limited how we're able to organize, but farm workers have continued to find ways to build pressure over the last several months. One of the things that we did back in May for May 1st, the International Workers' Day, there was a massive car rally in Vermont, in Burlington. And then that was followed up with a day of action of phone calls in June, where allies and volunteers just like flooded the phone lines of the CEO of the company calling for medical dignity. We've also been putting a lot of focus on social media and trying to build awareness and pressure on platforms like Facebook. And doing virtual presentations like this one, trying to take advantage of these times of lots of Zoom meetings, but to really get the word out and build support and awareness for the Milk with Dignity campaign. And to this day, Hannaford, this is a picture of the Ahold Delhaize, the parent company of Hannaford. Hannaford has still not publicly responded to farm workers' calls. However, we know that they're feeling the pressure and that we're starting to make progress. Earlier this year, Migrant Justice participated in one of the annual shareholder meetings of Ahold Delhaize, this parent company. And in that meeting, the president of Ahold's board of directors, this person on the screen here, was forced to address the Milk with Dignity campaign publicly in front of the company's shareholders. In addition to that, we've seen over the last year, Hannaford has been making large public donations to places like, they made a big announcement about a donation to support farms in the Northeast that were impacted by COVID. And we see them making statements about their commitment to workers' rights. So it's really clear that they're feeling the pressure, even though they're not responding directly to farm workers' calls. We see that they're trying to find ways to really make their brand look good and save face. But farm workers are continuing to say that things like donations, kind of like Band-Aid solutions and words that are just empty promises really don't address the systemic human rights violations that are taking place within Hannaford's supply chain. And really the only way to address those violations is by joining Milk with Dignity. So on October 3rd of this year, October 3rd, 2020, that day marked the 3rd year anniversary of when Ben and Jerry's joined onto the Milk with Dignity program. And it also marked 1 year of publicly campaigning, calling on Hannaford to join Milk with Dignity. And on this day, we released, this is a photo of the cover of this Milk with Dignity report, which is a report which documents the successes and the impacts of the Milk with Dignity program over the last 2 years. And on that same day, we also had a national day of action where there were delegations, 25 different delegations actually, of both farm workers and allies who went to Hannaford stores in Vermont, in New Hampshire, in Massachusetts, in Maine, and even in upstate New York. Made a trip to their local Hannaford store to deliver a copy of this report and again call on their local store managers to pass the word up that it's time for Hannaford to join Milk with Dignity. And so I wanted to share just a couple snapshots from that report. You can read the full report on the Migrant Justice website, and I really recommend that you do that. It's a really impressive, inspiring report with beautiful photos and testimony. But just to give you a little taste, this slide shows how you can see the premium that Abel was talking about, the extra money that's paid to participating companies. So in this case, Ben & Jerry's, for participating in Milk with Dignity, has already had a really huge impact on improving farm worker rights through things like wage increases, worker housing, paid vacation, sick time, personal protective equipment, and really just overall working conditions. So here's another slide just to hopefully whet your appetite to go check it out on the website, but showing a few more numbers and just like the concrete gains of the Milk with Dignity program in the last few years. And so Migrant Justice and our allies are relatively a fairly small group in comparison to this this mega corporation that's bringing in billions of dollars every year. So the question is really how are we going to win? How are we going to bring Hannaford to the table to sit down with farm workers and join Milk with Dignity? So something that we know is that every company's Achilles heel or like their weak spot is the image of their brand. And so actually this is a quote that the CEO of Hannaford, whose name is Mike Bale, actually said, that the biggest responsibility I feel like I have is to protect the brand. Our brand is everything. Our Hannaford cornucopia, what it stands for, is critically important, and that keeps me up at night. So this is how we're going to win. By building enough momentum, building enough support, making enough noise that finally Hannaford will come to realize that the cost to their brand and the image of their brand for not signing on to Milk with Dignity is actually more than it would cost to join the program and protect farm worker rights. We know that it's possible to win because we did it before. We did it with Ben & Jerry's, and it wasn't easy. Abel was talking about the campaign and all the actions that took place, the 13-mile march. It took nearly 3 years, but farm workers did eventually win, and we know that we can do that with Hannaford as well. And so this is a kind of a collage of photos. Farm workers have been taking videos and also photos with, you'll see some of these pictures have the Milk with Dignity report. And then there are a lot of photos of farm workers actually at Hannaford's or in the barn with Hannaford brand milk, because we know that farm workers are both producers of the milk and in many cases also consumers of the milk as well. So we've been using photos like these to build pressure on social media. And we actually have an action that we're working on right now where we're asking people to look up Hannaford on Facebook. Look them up, you'll see their page there, and then go to one of their posts and add a comment. And you can say something as simple as just like, Hannaford, join Milk with Dignity, or Hannaford, protect farm worker rights, it's time to join Milk with Dignity. But that's another way during this time with COVID and social distancing, that's another way that we're building pressure and visibility and support for the Milk with Dignity campaign. And it's a really quick thing. It's something that you can do from anywhere. Ideally, we're trying to get it so that we have comments going up every day or even multiple times a day. So feel free to make a lot of comments if you're up for it. And then, whoops. Oh, geez. The last slide, and then we'll open it up for questions. Okay, here we go. So getting ready for the Valentine's Day weekend, we've also been doing a lot of these photo petitions with signs that have messaging around Valentine's Day. So this picture it says in Spanish, Hannaford, don't break our heart. It's time to join Milk with Dignity. So keep an eye on Migrant Justice's social media accounts this weekend. We're going to be posting videos and photos and trying to just build a big social media storm around Milk with Dignity and Valentine's Day, and hope that you can support us there. So I think with that, I'm going to take us off screen share and open it up for questions and comments and just a general discussion.
Yeah, I think folks should just feel free to unmute and talk if you're comfortable with that, or stick with the chat, but just, we can go free for all style.
And feel free to share more. It's a little tricky over Zoom to have interactive conversations, but we'd love to hear, like, what are ways that you've been touched by the Milk with Dignity campaign or Migrant Justice's work? I'm sure there's others of you in the audience who participated in things before, and we'd love to hear that stuff.
Yep.
Someone's asking, Catherine's asking, can you repeat where we go to post in time for Valentine's Day?
Oh yeah, thank you. So if you have a Facebook account, that's where we've been doing this. You can just do a search for Hannaford Supermarket, and that should bring you right to their page. Actually, I can do it right now and share my screen so you can see what it looks like. But maybe we can go on to another question already.
Yeah, I think with Catherine, was following up on the question earlier asked today, and yeah, Catherine. So the way it went down with Ben & Jerry's is that Ben & Jerry's was acquired by Unilever before the whole campaign started, but they did sort of retain some power to make decisions over what programs they get involved with, where do they sort of put their money and stuff, more like with Ben & Jerry's itself, not with Unilever. And so they had some independence, Ben & Jerry's, to decide whether they join or not, and they were resistant, so we were pressuring Ben & Jerry's. But if the idea was that if Ben & Jerry's wasn't answering or wasn't responding, at the end of the day, Unilever was also going to be our target. It didn't get to that, but yeah, that's basically how it worked out.
Thank you, Val. Hopefully you can see on the screen share, I just went over to the Hannaford Facebook account here, and you can see they've got a Valentine's Day post right here. I just made a comment and said, Hannaford, it's time to join Milk with Dignity. And then right below, another member of the Migrant Justice Coordinating Committee, Elizabeth, has written, she wrote in Spanish, it's time already that you joined Milk with Dignity, Hannaford. And then she's posted a photo with our photo petition.
There are a bunch of other comments below too. It says view 9 more comments.
Yep. And the more people sort of leave a comment, the more people sort of join their Facebook and start. The more the more Hannaford sees that people are not going to stay quiet, and they're it's just more the farm workers. That's they'll have to reply eventually. Same as Ben & Jerry's, so it's going to take some time, but we know they'll answer.
Yeah, and just to see some more of these photos.
Let's kind of cover healthcare as well with this part of the protesting campaign, so to speak.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you that well.
Sorry. Does this cover healthcare as well as part of like the agreement that will be taken with Hannaford and these other companies? Is that incorporated?
No, that's a really good question. Yeah, it's a good question, and there is no so the program doesn't, the Meal with Dignity program doesn't require like you have to provide like healthcare insurance or like a healthcare plan, but what it does, so if you're right now, if you're working on a farm that is not under the program, basically you have no way of, or no, basically no support, no way of, if you get into at the farm, going to the hospital, and getting all of those bills covered because you get in on the farm. There's just a lot that, if you're not under the program, you don't do. But under the program, we're not saying, oh, the farm has to provide health insurance, but they do have to, for example, pay workers' compensation if they get injured. So, that's a lot of the time workers get injured. They just leave the farm, they get kicked out, and never, they just have to pay out of their own pocket. So having access to workers' comp, and also sick days is a big one under the program. So, sick days are required, vacation days. Like Adira was mentioning, people work long hours, and so there is, the program, there's a code for 8 hours and a lunch break, and so not necessarily like asking for like a healthcare plan, but just like in general, the program tries to make sure that the workers' sort of well-being is sort of being taken care of. And right now, especially during COVID, if you're not on a Meal with Dignity farm, you most likely don't have a mask to wear and stuff like that, or you're living in really overcrowded housing conditions. And with the program, there are your demand, the farm is required to provide the protective equipment like the gas, the mask, the goggles, and stuff like that, gloves, aprons. But yes.
Sorry, one other thing, just because I had organized an Ithaca, so I'm getting very excited about this. One of the things, because a lot of individuals in our community actually have not had access to like mental health care, just basic things, even like, dentistry is something that's been impacted pretty hard. And in the society we live in, not everybody's teeth are all that great just because of high sugar content in a lot of food, and the cheapest food is typically the worst for you. So one of the things that we're trying to initiate here is just getting in touch with local farms and just like looking into, I'd say, pretty sound homeopathic care, like learning how to harvest herbs that are for like basic toothache, stuff like that. And just working on learning how to talk to people that might have mental health issues during this time. And I was curious if you guys had watched any of the other sessions that have occurred so far, just because I think that might actually be a good connection to make, just to give them at least a little help, just and biding time until Hannaford actually comes and like into the picture and really sits down and talks to the workers,
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, there's a lot that we're doing, and in Vermont there are some like more direct services that there are for the community, and we try to connect with the community when there are sort of more direct services needs. But we really try to, our goal is to really organize and to transform the conditions that people are facing. And but yeah, that definitely something that it happens in the community. There is a lot of that, and we try to do the best that we can to connect them with with people that know what they're doing, and professional. We're not professionals on like healthcare and a lot of those things, and we try to sort of to do our best by really trying to change the system at the same time to make sure that, that doesn't continue to happen.
Belle, have you worked with the Open Door Clinic in Middlebury or any of your team? I'm not quite sure where you are. Yeah, because as I understand it, they have an outreach program, a health program, the Open Door Clinic.
Maddie, you wanna?
Yeah, definitely. The Open Door Clinic in Middlebury is a big provider of healthcare and health services for the community. And like Abel was talking about, Migrant Justice is really focused on like changing system level issues, but also supporting people individually and connecting with the services like the Open Door Clinic, and then using that as kind of that being like a path towards empowerment and getting organized to address the root causes.
Have you primarily been organizing? I mean, I know that in the past, like pre-COVID, there was a lot of meetings, like in person, and transportation was like a big issue with that. And now, like in COVID, what are meetings looking like? Like, are you meeting via Zoom? And do you think that's like people have access to that technology? And is that something that you think will continue?
It's a great question. Yeah, definitely with COVID, things have changed. People are, some farms have, taken measures, not allowing people to come into their farms and visit workers, and understandable, that they're afraid of workers getting injured, but getting COVID. And so, yeah, that definitely we had to adapt. We are now doing the community assemblies that we were talking about earlier, via Zoom, sometimes Zoom, or recording like a Zoom video and then uploading it to Facebook. So we're using actually Facebook a lot nowadays, and pretty much every single member, not every single member, like maybe 95% of the community has a Facebook, and we've been doing that, connecting through that to spread information on COVID. What to do if you get this information about the campaigns or assemblies. But yeah, assemblies have sort of now have been done through Facebook and Zoom. And in terms of like access to technology, I think the majority of workers have a smartphone, and so they're able to see like a video if we upload it. So it hasn't been that difficult to connect with workers. I mean, the face-to-face is always better and preferable, but in some cases it's not possible to happen.
Thank you.
Julie asked if you have ever asked Price Chopper about Milk with Dignity campaigning.
I can speak to that. So the decision to go with Hannaford as the next company, calling on the next company to expand Milk with Dignity, really came from the Farmworker Coordinating Committee, which Via is part of. And that decision came out of a lot of like study and analysis and conversation, thinking about like what is strategic, what's winnable, what will have a big impact. Yeah, so a lot of different factors went into like why Hannaford, and Hannaford isn't going to be the last company that Farmworkers will call on to join the program, because we want all the farms to be covered by Milk with Dignity eventually. But just as far as like strategy, the decision to go with Hannaford came from this kind of like planning process, and it may be that other supermarkets are next on the list, or we'll see where we go next. I don't know if you want to add anything about it.
Nope, that's it. Yeah. yeah, keep checking our Facebook.
Have you partnered, sorry, another question, with other farms that also use, like, that also have migrant labor and also supply Hannaford, but with like different products? Like, just thinking, like, I used to work for Champlain Orchards, and there's a huge migrant population who works every harvest and most of the year there, and Hannaford's was like one of our biggest customers. And just thinking, like, have there been other strategic partnerships for organizing, or are you guys pretty solo?
Wanna go, Maddie?
Okay. Yeah, it's hard over Zoom. You're not able to like look at someone's face. No, definitely strategic partners for sure. One of the really big, probably the biggest partnerships that Abel was talking about is another farm worker organization called the Coalition of Immokalee Workers, who are based in Florida and in the vegetable industry, so like tomatoes and other vegetables. And they really came up with this model that focuses on companies and corporations instead of going like farm by farm, one by one. So their leadership and support and collaboration has been incredibly key. And since they're in another industry, they're in the vegetable sector. For example, Ahold Delhaize, the parent company of Hannaford, they actually they own some other supermarkets, and some of those supermarkets already have contracts with already have agreements with the Coalition of Immokalee Workers and their Fair Food program. So that's a way that their work really complements our work to say then, like, hey, Ahold, you're already doing this for vegetables. Why not add milk? Why not protect the rights of farm workers in the dairy industry as well?
Yeah, and we're not like, like Maddie mentioned, we're partnered with other organizations that are mainly outside of Vermont, other work organizations. And as we sort of are ramping up the pressure to Hannaford's, we are connecting with other farm workers, not just in Vermont, but other farm workers that are milking, other dairy workers, I mean, in the state of Maine, in other states. The sort of workers, sometimes are in Maine and then they'll move to Vermont and maybe like they'll move back and forth a lot. And so there's a lot of that happening. And we've been able to connect with some workers that were in Maine, now they're in Vermont, and learn about some of the conditions in Maine as well, which they're pretty similar, and that's what we're trying to do, sort of try to understand more about sort of the supply chain of Hannaford's, not just in Vermont, but in the Northeast.
No sé si Yadira, si te gustaría agregar algo antes de cerrar. Creo que nos queda como 4 minutos.
Pues que me da muchísimo gusto haber participado, comentar, y el que yo pueda ayudar un poco. Sé que es un gran trabajo, pero el que yo pueda ayudar a hacer el cambio y levantar la voz para los que no pueden, por los que no pueden por miedo o porque su trabajo no se lo permite, pues a mí me da mucho gusto, y entre más personas se sumen a la lucha y para que podamos cambiar la forma de vivir de los inmigrantes, no nada más de los trabajadores de la industria lechera, ¿no? Yo digo que todo tipo de inmigrantes. Pues, me gustaría que más personas se sumaran. Y me dio mucho gusto estar con ustedes.
Ayuda, mamá. So Yadira says, no, thank you. It's a huge pleasure to participate and be part of this struggle. It's an honor to be here, and there's so much to do. There's so much change that needs to be made, but I'm so happy to be here, raising my voice together with you all for those who aren't able to be here because of fear or because of having a really crazy work schedule. The more people who join in the struggle, the stronger we are, and the more we can do to make change, not just for dairy workers, but for all immigrants and for all workers. So thank you so much.